The Art of War, the Essential Translation by Sun-Tzu, continued. Disc 6.
Chapter 7. The Fray. Zhang Yu. The two armies fight it out face to face in the fray. Before entering the fray, we need to know the empty and full, the enemy's and our own weaknesses and strengths. This section therefore follows on from the previous one.
Master Sun said, "In war, the general receives orders from his sovereign, assembles troops, and forms an army. He makes camp opposite the enemy. The true difficulty begins with the fray itself."
Chern Hao. There are old and well-established rules for the assembling of troops and the forming of an army, and for making camp. It is with the fray itself that the difficulty commences.
The difficulty of the fray lies in making the crooked straight.
Cao Cao. Make a show of being far away, then march with all speed and arrive before the enemy. Du Mu. Fool the enemy, cause him to be remiss while you press swiftly ahead. The Way in Its Power, Chapter 22. Be twisted and thus be complete. Be crooked and thus be straight. Translator. As Giles says, quote, "This is one of those highly condensed and somewhat enigmatical expressions of which Master Sun is so fond," end quote. Part of the problem lies in the ambiguity of the Chinese pair yu, zhi, which can mean both crooked, straight, and circuitous, direct.
And in making an advantage of misfortune.
He Yan Shi. Suppose the country that you are attacking is a long way away, and the roads to it are twisting and mountainous. To gain the upper hand, divide your troops and send out surprise sorties. Follow the advice of local guides, take shortcuts, catch the enemy unawares, striking him when he is least prepared. Through the judicious use of speed, you will have made an advantage of misfortune. Giles. Signal examples of this saying are afforded by the two famous passages across the Alps, that of Hannibal, 247 to 183 BC, which laid Italy at his mercy, and that of Napoleon, 2,000 years later, which resulted in the great victory of Marengo, 1800.
Take a roundabout route and lure the enemy with some gain. Set out after him, but arrive before him. This is to master the crooked and the straight.
Cao Cao. Take a roundabout, crooked route and make it seem to involve a great distance. You may start after the enemy, but if you calculate carefully and estimate distances correctly, you can still arrive before him. Du Mu. Let the enemy think your route long and tortuous, and he will drop his guard. Lure him with the prospect of some gain, and he will lose concentration. Then march with utmost speed and take him by surprise, setting out after him, but arriving before him at the place of battle, in time to seize the strategic positions. When the troops of Qin attacked Han, 270 BC, the king of Zhao, a Han ally, first consulted Lian Po, who advised him that the distance was too great and the intervening country too rugged and difficult for them to intervene in Han. The king then turned to Zhao Shi, who admitted the hazardous nature of the march, but said, "We shall be like two rats fighting in a hole, and the braver one will win." So he set out from the Zhao capital of Handan, but when he had traveled no more than a dozen miles, ordered his men to pitch camp. For 28 days they dug themselves firmly in. General Zhao deliberately gave the spies sent by Qin the impression that he and his men were loath to travel all the way to Han. Then, as soon as the spies had reported back to their masters on what they had seen, Zhao set off on a forced march, pressing on through 2 nights and a day. He took the Qin army by surprise, occupied the heights to their north, and won a resounding victory.
The fray can bring gain. It can bring danger.
Cao Cao. All depends on the skill of the warrior.
Throw your entire force into the fray for some gain, and you may still fail.
Cao Cao. You may arrive late. Mei Yao Chern. It is cumbersome and slow to commit the whole army to a maneuver. Jia Lin. Better conceive a subtle plan, keep it secret, and deceive the enemy into thinking that you are taking a long, roundabout, crooked route. Then take him by surprise.
Abandon camp and enter the fray for some gain, and you may lose your equipment.
Du mu. Attacking with the whole army, baggage train and all, is cumbersome and slow. But attacking with light troops can mean leaving the baggage train unattended and sacrificing it. Du yo. The enemy may take advantage of this empty, weak spot and annihilate your rear while you are attacking with light troops.
Order your men to carry their armor and make forced march, day and night without halting. March 30 miles at double speed for some gain, and you will lose all your commanders. The most vigorous men will be in the vanguard, the weakest in the rear. 1 in 10 will arrive.
Cao Cao. Do not fight after marching 30 miles. Your commanders will all be taken. Du mu. An average day's march is 10 miles, at the end of which soldiers normally pitch camp. They can make a forced march of 30 or 40 miles, but if they engage in battle immediately afterward, they will be exhausted and all their officers will be captured. Li Chuan. On one occasion, when pursuing Liu Bei, Cao Cao covered 100 miles in 24 hours. This led to his subsequent defeat at the famous Battle of Red Cliff, A.D. 208. And when Peng Juan pursued Sun Bin, circa 341 B.C., he met his end at Ma Ling.
March 15 miles for some gain, and the commander of the vanguard will fall. Only half the men will arrive. March 10 miles for some gain, and 2 in 3 men will arrive. Without its equipment, an army is lost. Without provisions, an army is lost. Without base stores, an army is lost. Without knowing the plans of the feudal lords, you cannot form alliances. Without knowing the lie of hills and woods, of cliffs and crags, of marshes and fens, you cannot march. Without using local guides, you cannot exploit the lie of the land.
Du mu. As Master Zhuan says, in war, a general must study the maps of the region. He must know which are the difficult passages for wagons, which stretches of river are liable to flooding. He must be familiar with the mountain ranges and valleys, the rivers and the topography and relief in general, the variations in vegetation, the distances involved in the various routes, the relative size and importance of the various fortified towns and cities, the relative poverty of the different areas. All this he must know. Only when all of this is stored in his memory can he take proper advantage of the lie of the land. And Duke Li Jing once said, "Cloak your attack in secrecy, as do the bands of local brigands. Choose brave men and intelligent commanders. With the help of local guides, penetrate deep into the mountains and forests, making no sound, leaving no trace. Sometimes such men wear upon their feet moccasins incised in imitation of the paws of animals, leaving nothing but animal imprints on the mountain trails. Sometimes they hide themselves in the undergrowth, wearing headgear in imitation of the plumage of birds. In this way they can hear the most distant sounds, they can see the most remote sights. They can be all concentration and gauge the exact moment for action. They can be all attention and perceive the slightest sign. From the trace of some movement in the water, they know when the enemy is crossing a ford. From the trembling of a branch, they know of the approach of enemy reinforcements." Translator. The last 14 lines of Master Sun's text occur again in Chapter 11.
War is founded on deception.
Du mu. Deceive the enemy. Keep him ignorant of your true situation, and the victory is yours. Wang Shi. This means making the crooked straight, making an advantage of misfortune. Translator. It has been observed that General Schwarzkopf was following Master Sun to the letter in the Gulf War when he fooled Saddam Hussein as to the true nature of his attack, threatening an amphibious assault in the east but launching an end run in the west. Giles alludes to Turenne, Louis XIV's Marshal of France, 1611-75, according to whose tactics deception of the enemy, especially as to the numerical strength of his troops, took a very prominent position.
Movement is determined by advantage.
Zhang Yu. Move only when you see an advantage. Do not make futile attacks.
Division and unity are its elements of change.
Cao. Dividing and uniting troops, these changes derive from observation of the enemy. Du. At times divide, at others unite. Perplex the enemy. Observe his response to your dispositions, then improvise accordingly and emerge the victor. Zhang Yu. At times divide and disperse your dispositions, at other times unite and concentrate your potential. These changes derive from the actions of the enemy. Translator. As Brigadier General Sam Griffith points out, page 51, Chairman Mao paraphrases this verse several times. For example, quote, "A commander proves himself wise by being able to disperse, concentrate, or shift his forces in time according to specific circumstances. This wisdom in foreseeing changes and this sense of right timing are not easy to acquire." End quote.
Be rushing as a wind.
Cao. Striking the void. Mei Yao Chun. Coming without trace.
Be stately as a forest.
Meng. When marching slowly, order and ranks must be preserved like the rows of trees in a forest to guard against surprise attack.
Be ravaging as a fire.
Zhang Yu. As it says in the Book of Songs, fierce as a raging fire which no man can check.
Be still as a mountain.
Zhang Yu. As Master Shun, chapter 15, discussing military affairs, says, "When it is drawn up in camp, that is still, it, the army of the perfect man, is like a solid rock. Whoever butts against it will be broken, smashed to pieces." Translator. According to Brigadier General Griffith, page 106, these four phrases were used by the 16th century Japanese warrior Takeda Harunobu, the Zen monk Archbishop Shingen, died 1573, as slogans on his banners. This same general, while reputed to have been a studious and meditative scholar, was also a ruthless and ferocious commander whose camp equipment apparently included 3 large kettles for boiling criminals.
Be inscrutable as night.
Zhang Yu. When dark clouds cover the sky and it is impossible to detect the first light of morning.
Be swift as thunder or lightning.
Zhang Yu. Strike suddenly, like a clap of thunder or a bolt of lightning, too quick to be repulsed. As the ancient duke says, "A clap of thunder leaves no time to cover the ears. A flash of lightning strikes before the eyes can blink." Compare Chen Hao's comment in Chapter 2.
Plunder the countryside and divide the spoil.
Cao. Let the enemy create your victory. Zhang Yu. This is simply a matter of enforcing the earlier advice of Master Sun, that, quote, "a wise general should feed his army off the enemy," end quote. The enemy will be reluctant to share their modest possessions.
Extend territory and distribute the profits.
Chen Hao. Quarter your soldiers on the land and let them sow and plant it. Giles. It is by acting on this principle and harvesting the lands they invaded that the Chinese have succeeded in carrying out some of their most memorable and triumphant expeditions, such as that of Ban Chao, AD 32-102, who penetrated the Caspian, and in more recent times of the Manchu general Fu Kanyan, died 1796, and Sun-Tzu, 1812-85. Translator. Fu Kanyan commanded several expeditions into Central Asia and Tibet. Sun-Tzu was largely responsible for the creation of the province of Xinjiang, formerly referred to as Chinese Turkestan, in 1884. It must be remembered that Giles was writing during the last days of imperialism, when China's ambitions in Central Asia seemed only reasonable.
Weigh the situation carefully before making a move. Victory belongs to the man who can master the stratagem of the crooked and the straight. This is the art of the fray.
Giles. With these words, the chapter would naturally come to an end, but there now follows a long appendix in the shape of an extract from an earlier book on war, now lost, but apparently extant at the time when Master Sun wrote.
The military primer says,
Mei Yao Chern, Wang Shi, an ancient military classic. Giles. Considering the enormous amount of fighting that had gone on for centuries before Master Sun's time between the various kingdoms and principalities of China, it is not in itself improbable that a collection of military maxims should have been made and written down at some earlier period.
When ears do not hear, use gongs and drums. When eyes do not see, use banners and flags. Gongs and drums, banners and flags are the ears and eyes of the army.
Zhang Yu. If sight and hearing are focused simultaneously on the same object, the maneuvers of 1,000,000 soldiers will be like those of a single man. Hence, Master Sun's earlier statement, fighting with many is the same as fighting with few. It is a matter of marshalling men with gongs, identifying them with flags.
With the army focused, the brave will not advance alone, nor will the fearful retreat alone.
Du Mu. When Master Wu fought against the state of Qin, there was an officer who, before the battle commenced, was unable to control his ardor. He advanced and returned with a pair of heads. Master Wu ordered him to be beheaded. The army commissioner protested. He is a talented officer. He should not be beheaded. To which Master Wu replied, I do not question the fact, but he acted without orders. The man was beheaded. Zhang Yu. As the saying goes, those who advance against orders and those who retreat against orders are equally to blame.
This is the art of managing many. In night fighting, use torches and drums. In daylight, use banners and flags so as to transform the ears and eyes of the troops.
Zhen Hao. At the end of the Tianbao era, AD 742-56, Li Guanbi hastened with 500 cavalry to Heiyang with a great display of torches. The rebel leader, Shi Sinming, at the head of his large force, did not dare obstruct their passage.
A whole fighting force can be robbed of its spirit.
Li Chuan, robbed of its zeal and courage. The state of Qi attacked the state of Lu at Changshao. The Qi drums sounded, and the Duke of Lu was about to join battle when his counselor, Cao Gui, advised him that the time had not yet come. When the Qi drums had sounded 3 times, Cao said the time was right. They joined battle, and the Qi army was utterly defeated. The Duke of Liu asked Cao what his reasoning had been. Battle, replied the counselor, is a matter of courage and spirit. After 1 drum roll, their spirits were up. After 2, they had begun to droop. After 3, they were disheartened. They were disheartened. We were full of spirit. That is why we won. Zhang Yu. In war, by instilling a sense of anger in all ranks of the army, we can make them irresistible. The enemy will be at their keenest when they first arrive, and at this time we should not engage them, but wear them down, wait for their zeal and courage to weaken, and then attack. In this way, we can rob them of their spirit. Master Wu's Art of War, Chapter 4 on Generalship. In war, there are 4 keys: spirit, terrain, situation, strength.
A general can be robbed of his presence of mind.
Zhang Yu. The mind is the general's chief asset. It enables him to create order out of disorder, to replace fear with courage. The skillful warrior disturbs and disorders the enemy, harasses and perplexes him, harries him and fills him with fear. He robs him of his presence of mind, his ability to think strategically. Duke Li said, "Attack is not restricted to attacking cities and military formations. We master the art of attacking the mind. Attacking the mind involves nurturing our own mind, our own sense of ease and order, and then robbing the enemy of his." Mei Yao-chun. If the army has lost its spirit, the general will lose his presence of mind.
The soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning.
Translator. I cannot resist giving Giles' characteristically Edwardian comment, complete with references to Livy. Quote, "Always provided, I suppose, that he has had breakfast. At the Battle of the Trebia, 218 BC, the Romans were foolishly allowed to fight fasting, whereas Hannibal's men had breakfasted at their leisure." Unquote.
By noon it has dulled. By evening he has begun to think of home. The skillful warrior avoids the keen spirit, attacks the dull and the homesick.
Translator. Chairman Mao makes use of this maxim of Master Sun's. During the Jiangxi opposition to the Third Extermination Campaign of Chiang Kai-shek, the Red Army carried out an extreme retreat. But this was essential to our ultimate victory, because at the time of the Third Extermination, the enemy forces were more than 10 times more numerous than those of the Red Army. When Master Sun talks of avoiding the keen spirit and attacking the dull and the homesick, he means allowing the enemy to become exhausted and demoralized in order to overcome its superior forces. Selected Works, page 192.
This is mastery of spirit.
Zhang Yu. Nurturing one's own spirit and robbing the enemy's.
He confronts chaos with discipline. He treats tumult with calm. This is mastery of mind.
Du Mu. As the Marshal's Treatise says, his own mind is firm. He lets the enemy fashion his victory. His mind is already firm, but he regulates it, makes it peaceful and strong, so that he is not disturbed by events, not deluded by thoughts of gain. He waits for the enemy to become chaotic. He waits for the enemy to become tumultuous, and then he launches his attack. He Yan Shi. The general must use the subtlety of his one mind, and with it he must confront the myriad host of the enemy and oppose the ravening wolves. He must contemplate wisely the vagaries of circumstances, the ups and downs of victory and defeat. He must remain calm, or how can he continue to respond to events with infinite resource? How can he remain unconfused? He must remain unmoved in the face of great adversity. He must be undeluded by the infinite complexities of the world. His discipline must be sufficient to confront the enemy's chaos. His calm must be sufficient to confront the enemy's tumult. Then he can view the enemy as if he were some petty thief.
He meets distance with closeness. He meets exhaustion with ease. He meets hunger with plenty. This is mastery of strength.
Zhang Yu. The skillful mastery of one's own strength and exhaustion of the enemy's.
He does not intercept well-ordered banners. He does not attack a perfect formation. This is mastery of change.
Zhang Yu. It is essential to know and understand changing circumstances. This way of change, the skillful mastery of change, consists in responding to the enemy's circumstances.
These are axioms of the art of war. Do not advance uphill. Do not oppose an enemy with his back to a hill.
Sun-Tzu. This concerns the potential energy of the terrain. Zhang Yu. Zhu Liang said, "When fighting on hilly terrain, do not face uphill. When an enemy comes downhill, do not confront him. The potential of the situation is not favorable. Draw him away to level ground and fight him there."
Do not pursue an enemy feigning flight.
Du Mu Li Chuan. For fear of an ambush.
Do not attack keen troops. Do not swallow a bait.
Mei Yao Chern. The fish that is greedy for bait gets caught. The army that is greedy for bait is defeated. When enemy troops fish for us, we must never take the bait. Zhang Yu. The three stratagems says, "Beneath every morsel of succulent bait lies a hooked fish."
Do not thwart a returning army.
Meng. When men are thinking of going home, they will fight to the death, and no one will be able to stand in their way. Zhang Yu, Du Mu, Giles. When troops are abroad, they all have their thoughts set on the return home. Whoever stands in their way, they will fight to the death. As the great General Han Xin, died 196 BC, said, "Who can hope to defeat soldiers that are thinking of going home?" In AD 198, Sun-Tzu was trapped between two of his enemies who controlled each outlet of a narrow pass. He knew he was in a desperate situation. He bored a hole in the mountainside and laid an ambush in it. Then he marched on with his baggage train. When it grew light, Zhang Xu, the opposing general, seeing that Sun-Tzu had retreated, pressed after him in hot pursuit. As soon as their whole army had passed by, Sun-Tzu's hidden troops fell on its rear, while Cao himself turned and met his pursuers in front, so that they were thrown into confusion and annihilated. Sun-Tzu said afterward, "The brigands tried to thwart my army as it was returning and brought me to battle in a desperate position on death ground. Hence, I knew the way to victory." Compare The Three Kingdoms, chapter 18.
Leave a passage for a besieged army.
Du Mu. Let the enemy believe that there is a road to safety. This belief will prevent him from fighting with the courage of despair. Then attack him. He Yanxi. Sun-Tzu besieged the city of Huguan and issued an order. "When the city falls, every resident is to be buried alive." Months went by, and still the city did not fall. Cao Ren said to his lord, "When besieging a city, one should always leave open a passage to safety, a gate to life. But you, my lord, have let it be known that they will all be put to death, so they are fighting for their lives. Besides, the city is well fortified, and they have plenty of provisions. If we attack, a large number of officers and men will be wounded. To protract this siege of a strong city, to fight against men determined to fight to the death, is not a good plan." Sun-Tzu followed his advice, and the city surrendered.
Do not press an enemy at bay.
Zhen Hao. Birds and beasts, when brought to bay, will scratch and bite. Zhang Yu. If your adversary has burned his boats and destroyed his cooking pots and is prepared to stake all on a battle, he must not be pressed too hard. He Yanxi, Giles. The Chinese general Fu Yanqin of the short-lived later Jin dynasty during the period of the Five Dynasties, together with his colleague Du Zhuangwei, was surrounded by a vastly superior army of Khitans in the year AD 945. The country was bare and desert-like, and the little Chinese force was soon in dire straits for want of water. Men and horses were dying of thirst in large numbers. At last, Fu Yanqin said, "We are desperate men at bay. Far better to die for our country than to go with fettered hands into captivity." A strong gale happened to be blowing from the northeast and darkening the air with dense clouds of sandy dust. Du Zhongwei was for waiting until this had abated before deciding on a final attack. But luckily another officer, Li Shujern by name, was quicker to see an opportunity and said, "They are many and we are few, but in the midst of this sandstorm our numbers will not be discernible. Victory will go to the strenuous fighter, and the wind will be our best ally." Accordingly, Fu Yanqin made a sudden and wholly unexpected onslaught with his cavalry, routed the barbarians, and succeeded in breaking through to safety. Du Mu. King Fu Chai of Wu, son of Master Sun's patron He Liu, once said, "Wild beasts, when at bay, will fight desperately. How much more true is this of men?" Under the reign of Emperor Xuan of the Han Dynasty, 74 to 49 BC, General Zhao Chunguo went to suppress the Qiang tribesmen in the southwest. When the Qiang saw his great army, they abandoned their own baggage train and set out to cross the river. The way was through a narrow gorge, and Zhao followed them at a leisurely pace. One of his officers said to him, "Why are we moving so slowly when such a prize lies within our grasp?" Zhao replied, "One should never press an enemy at bay. If I go after them in a leisurely fashion, they will not turn around. If I press them, they will turn and fight to the death." His officers praised his skill. In the event, the Qiang drowned in large numbers and were utterly defeated.
This is the art of war.
Chapter 8. The 9 Changes. Wang Shi. 9 simply stands for a large number. In war there are infinite variations. Jiang Yu. Change here refers to the sort of improvisation that ignores precedents and rules, the flexibility that discovers an expedient for every situation. Translator. The 9 changes are probably the 9 injunctions, from "on intractable terrain do not encamp," down to "there are terrains not to contest." The final 10th injunction, "there are rulers' orders not to obey," can be applied to all 9.
Master Sun said, "In war, the general receives orders from his sovereign, then assembles troops and forms an army."
Zhang Yu. This echoes the previous chapter. Translator. As Giles remarks, this is repeated from Chapter 7, where it is certainly more in place. It may have been interpolated here merely in order to supply a beginning to the chapter. Ames comments that the uncharacteristic brevity of this chapter would suggest some substantial textual problem. On intractable terrain, do not encamp. Zhang Yu. Mountains and forests, cliffs, crags, marshes, fens, any terrain that is hard to navigate is classified as intractable. It provides nothing to depend on, so the army cannot camp there. Translator. These types of terrain occur again with certain variations in Chapter 11, as does Zhang Yu's description of intractable terrain, word for word.
On crossroad terrain, join forces with allies.
Zhang Yu. Terrain connecting on all 4 sides, where it is appropriate to approach one's neighbors and form alliances.
On dire terrain, do not linger.
Zhang Yu. Terrain situated across the frontier in hostile territory. Li Chuan. Country in which there are no springs or wells, no flocks or herds, vegetables or firewood. Jia Lin. Gorges, chasms, and precipices with no through roads.
On enclosed terrain, make strategic plans.
Jia Lin. When we are enclosed on all sides by precipices, when the enemy can come and go but we are unable to move freely, on terrain such as this there is indeed need of ingenious and strategic thinking if we are to prevent the enemy from injuring us and save ourselves.
On death terrain, do battle.
Li Chuan. Place troops in a position where they face certain death and they will identify with the conflict. Such was the case when Han Xin defeated the army of Zhao, leading his men out of Well Ravine by means of a subtle stratagem. Mei Yao Chern, there are obstacles before and behind. A decision is taken to fight to the death.
There are roads not to take.
Li Chuan, especially those leading through narrow defiles where an ambush is to be feared. Silver Sparrow Mountain Bamboo Strips. When shallow penetration prevents our vanguard from properly functioning, or deep penetration cuts us off from our own rear guard, in such a situation, a move brings no gain and staying still leads to capture. Translator. This and the 4 following passages from the bamboo strips are taken from the text reconstructed as the 4 changes. See Li Ling, 1997, page 176.
There are armies not to attack.
Silver Sparrow Mountain Bamboo Strips. As when 2 armies are encamped facing each other, we calculate that we have the strength to defeat the enemy and take their commander captive. But in the longer term, they may have some cunning stratagem up their sleeve. In a situation such as this, we choose not to attack. Cao Cao. It may be possible to attack an army, but the terrain may be precipitous and inhospitable. By staying there, one would risk losing a former gain, and any gain brought by holding it would be trifling. The enemy troops, on the other hand, being hard-pressed, would fight to the death. Wang Shi. In my opinion, troops proffered as bait, crack troops, troops with well-ordered banners and in perfect formation, should not be attacked. Zhern Hao. When you see some trivial gain but cannot defeat the enemy, do not attack for fear of exhausting your men's strength. Du Mu. Armies not to attack include keen troops, a returning army, a desperate army, an army on death terrain.
There are towns not to besiege.
Silver Sparrow Mountain Bamboo Strips. We may calculate that we have the strength to take a town, but if taking it confers no advantage, and if, having taken it, we would have trouble holding on to it, then we would choose not to besiege it. Cao Cao. If a town is small and well fortified and has ample provisions, it should not be besieged. I myself decided to pass by Huabi and press on into the heart of Xuzhou, and as a result, I took 14 important district cities. Du Mu. This probably refers to an enemy in a strategic position behind walls and deep moats with a good supply of grain and food. Their purpose is to detain our army. Even if we were to attack such a city and take it, there would be no particular advantage. And if we were to attack it and not to take it, the assault would certainly wear down our own military power, so we should not besiege it at all. Zhang Yu. No town should be besieged that, if taken, cannot be held, or, if left alone, will not cause any trouble. Xun Ying, when urged to attack Biyang, replied, "The city is small and well fortified. Even if I were to succeed in taking it, it would be no great feat of arms, whereas if I were to fail, I should make myself a laughingstock." Giles. In the 17th century, sieges still formed a large proportion of war in Europe. It was Turenne who directed attention to the importance of marches, countermarches, and maneuvers. He said, "It is a great mistake to waste men in taking a town when the same expenditure of soldiers will gain a province."
There are terrains not to contest.
Silver Sparrow Mountain Bamboo Strips, fragmentary. Mountains and valleys that offer no sustenance, empty, do not contest these. Du Mu. Wu Zichu advised Fu Chai, king of Wu, saying, "If we were to attack the state of Qi, even if we were to win it, it would be like possessing a field of stones."
There are rulers' orders not to obey.
Silver Sparrow Mountain Bamboo Strips. When his orders go against the changes just described, do not obey them. Cao Cao. If they are inappropriate to circumstances, do not be restrained by the ruler's orders. Du Mu. Master Wei Liao said, War is an instrument of ill omen. Combat is contrary to virtue. Generals are officers of death. They know neither heaven nor earth. They respect neither enemy nor their own lord. Zhang Yu, King Fu Chai said, "If it is right, do it. Do not wait for orders." Translator. This is not a 10th injunction, but a general observation applicable to all of the previous 9.
The general who knows the gains of the 9 changes understands war.
Jia Lin. He relies on the dynamic of opportunity. He adapts to changing circumstances. He follows the prospect of gain and lets gain decide. He is not a stickler for precedent. In this way, he can enjoy the fruits, gains of total flexibility.
The general ignorant of the gains of the 9 changes may know the lie of the land, but he will never reap the gain of that knowledge.
Jia Lin. He may know the lie of the land, but if in his mind he is not attuned to change, this will not only prevent him from reaping the gain, it will expose him to harm. A general should prize adapting to change. Zhang Yu. Every kind of ground or land has certain fixed natural features, the lie of the land, and also contains a certain dynamic for change. A knowledge of the topographical features will avail little on its own, unless it is supplemented by an understanding of the sometimes unpredictable dynamic for change.
The warrior, ignorant of the art of the 9 changes, may know the 5 gains, but will not get the most from his men.
Jia Lin. If he can adapt to change when face to face with the potential of the situation, then the gain will remain unchanged and the harm will stay with the enemy. There is no constant model. If he can grasp the principle of this, he will be able to get the most out of his men. A road may be, topographically speaking, short, but it may also abound in natural obstacles and be a potential site, dynamic, for an ambush. It should therefore not be taken. An army may be topographically open to attack, but if it is desperate and likely to fight to the death, the dynamic, it should not be attacked. A city may be isolated and therefore topographically open to siege, but if it is well stocked, if the morale of its troops is high, if their commander is intelligent and his ministers loyal, an unpredictable dynamic element of change creeps in, and the place should not be besieged. Ground may be contestable, but if we know that, once taken, it will be difficult to hold, and that it will bring no gain but will probably lead to counterattack and casualties, again an element of change must be allowed for, and that ground should not be contested. Under normal circumstances, it is right to obey the sovereign's orders, but there are some circumstances in which interference from the court is harmful, and in that case the orders should be disobeyed. Such changes as these have to be grasped flexibly in the light of circumstances. They cannot be determined beforehand. An inflexible approach will only lead to defeat. Giles. We see the uselessness of having an eye for weaknesses in the enemy's armor without being clever enough to recast one's plans on the spur of the moment.
The wise leader, in his deliberations, always blends consideration of gain and harm.
Cao Cao. In an advantageous gain situation, he ponders disadvantage, harm. In a disadvantageous situation, he ponders advantage.
By tempering thoughts of gain, he can accomplish his goal.
Du Mu. If we want to win an advantage, gain, from the enemy, we must not fix our minds exclusively on that advantage, but must also consider the threat of harm posed by the enemy and take this into consideration in our calculations. Mei Yao Chern. If we temper thought of gain with consideration of harm, then our goal becomes feasible.
By tempering thoughts of harm, he can extricate himself from calamity.
He Yan Shi. Gain and harm give rise to each other. The enlightened constantly reflect on this. Du Mu. If we wish to extricate ourselves from a calamity inflicted by the enemy, we must do more than consider the power of the enemy to harm us. We must never lose sight of our own ability to gain an advantage over the enemy. This thought must temper our perception of calamity and enter into our planning. Then it will be possible to avert the calamity. That is why Master Sun has just said, "The wise leader in his deliberations always blends consideration of gain and harm." For example, if the enemy is surrounding us and all we think of is the negative idea of breaking out and escaping, our troops' morale will sag and the enemy will be sure to pursue us and attack. We should urge our men on to fight and counterattack, and let the positive prospect of victory, the thought of gain, motivate them to break the encirclement.
He reduces the feudal lords to submission by causing them harm.
Jia Lin. There are many ways of doing this. He can entice away the enemy's best and wisest men so that he is left without ministers. He can introduce traitors into the enemy's ranks and render his government ineffectual. He can sow dissension between ruler and ministers by means of intrigue and deceit. He can cause exhaustion among the enemy's men and squandering of his treasure through subtle scheming. He can corrupt the enemy's morals with sensual pleasure. He can unsettle his mind with lovely women. All of these methods, if carried out with subtlety and secrecy, can harm the enemy and reduce him to submission. Zhang Yu. Get the enemy into a position where he must inevitably suffer harm, and he will submit of his own accord. Translator. Giles comments, "Some of the ways of inflicting this injury enumerated by Jia Lin would only occur to the Oriental mind."
He wears them down by keeping them constantly occupied.
Du Yo. He prevents them from having any rest, as the state of Han did to the state of Qin, by advising them to dig a canal.
He precipitates them with thoughts of gain.
Meng. We cause them to forget the changes, Giles, the reasons for acting otherwise than on their first impulse, and hasten in our direction. We, meanwhile, work the changes and have the upper hand. We get the best out of our men.
The skillful warrior does not rely on the enemy's not coming, but on his own preparedness.
Giles. Lord Roberts, British general in India, Afghanistan, and the Boer War, born in 1832, to whom the sheets of the present work were submitted previous to publication, wrote, "Many of Master Sun Wu's maxims are perfectly applicable to the present day, and this one is one that the people of this country would do well to take to heart."
He does not rely on the enemy's not attacking, but on his own impregnability.
Zhang Yu. He must always think of calamity and take precautions.
There are 5 pitfalls for a general. Recklessness leading to destruction.
Translator. Recklessness, literally the sense that one is doomed to die. Sun-Tzu. Bravery without forethought. Zhang Yu. The reckless warrior willing to fight to the death may not succumb to brute force, but can still be lured into an ambush and put to death. Hence, the Marshal's treatise says, "Courting death does not win the victory. If a general has no strategy, he will send his vanguard to their deaths and still come out the loser." Du Mu. A foolish general who is also brave is a calamity. Lord Yellowstone said, "The brave are set on achieving their goal. The foolish are impervious to death." Master Wu said, "People always look for courage in a general, but courage is only a part of the picture. A courageous man is liable to fight recklessly and to ignore thoughts of long-term gain. Such a man is not a skillful general."
Cowardice leading to capture.
Translator. Cowardice, literally the desire to get out alive. Sun-Tzu. He who sees an advantage but is too afraid to advance. Du Mu. During the Eastern Jin dynasty, AD 317 to 420, Liu Yu crossed the Yangtze in pursuit of the rebel Huan Xuan and fought him at Zhengrong Island. Liu's troops were only a few thousand and were hugely outnumbered by the rebel troops. But Huan, fearing the consequences of defeat, had a light getaway skiff constantly moored at the ready beside his warship, which greatly undermined the morale of his men. As a result, when the imperial troops attacked downwind with fire ships, they utterly routed Huan's forces. Meng, the cowardly general set on getting home alive and reluctant to fight, undermines the morale of his men and makes them vulnerable to attack. As the ancient duke said, by letting slip an opportunity for gain, he faces disaster. He Yanshi, the marshal's treatise, says, he who values survival above all else will be prone to hesitate. Hesitation is a great calamity.
A hot temper, prone to provocation.
Du mu. An enemy of this temperament is easily insulted and provoked into making a rash move that will lead him into defeat. In AD 357, when the Tibetan prince Yao Xiang was attacked by a force led by Deng Qiang, Fu Huangmei, and others, he shut himself behind his walls and refused to fight. Deng Qiang said to Huangmei, Yao Xiang has a headstrong temperament and is easily provoked. We should keep up the pressure, and eventually he will lose his temper and come out, in which case we will take him in one battle. Huangmei followed his advice. Yao Xiang came out to fight in a fury and was duly cut down. Du Yo. An angry, impulsive man is easily provoked and sent to his death. His anger prevents him from seeing the difficulties. Wang Shi. The great quality in a general is steadiness.
A delicacy of honor, tending to shame.
Giles. This need not be taken to mean that a sense of honor is really a defect in a general. What Master Sun condemns is rather an exaggerated sensitiveness to slanderous reports, the thin-skinned man who is unnecessarily stung by opprobrium, however undeserved.
A concern for his men, leading to trouble.
Du mu. A general who is overly compassionate and filled with concern for his men will be prevented by his fear of casualties from giving up a short-term gain for a long-term one. Giles. Here again, Master Sun does not mean that the general is to be careless of the welfare of his troops. All he wishes to emphasize is the danger of sacrificing any important military advantage to the immediate comfort of his men. This is a short-sighted policy because in the long run, the troops will suffer more from the defeat, or at best, the prolongation of the war, which will be the consequence. A mistaken feeling of pity will often induce a general to relieve a beleaguered city or to reinforce a hard-pressed detachment, contrary to his military instincts. It is now generally admitted that our repeated efforts to relieve the town of Ladysmith in the South African War of 1899 to 1902 were so many strategic blunders which defeated their own purpose. And in the end, relief came through the very man who started out with the distinct resolve no longer to subordinate the interest of the whole to sentiment in favor of a part. An old soldier of one of our generals who failed most conspicuously in this war tried once, I remember, to defend him to me on the ground that he was always, quote, so good to his men, unquote. By this plea, had he but known it, he was only condemning him out of Master Sun's mouth.
These 5 excesses in a general are the bane of war. If an army is defeated and its general slain, it will surely be because of these 5 perils. They demand the most careful consideration.
Chapter 9. On the March. Zheng Yu. Once one knows the 9 changes, one can choose one's goal and march.
Master Sun said, in taking up position and confronting the enemy.
Zheng Yu. The section below, from Cross Mountains to These are places of ambush, lairs for spies, concerns taking up position. The subsequent section, from When the enemy is close at hand and makes no move, to Must be regarded with great vigilance, concerns confronting the enemy. Giles. The rest of the chapter, after the 2 sections already identified by Zheng Yu, consists of a few desultory remarks, chiefly on the subject of discipline.
Cross mountains. Stay close to valleys.
Du mu. Once the army has crossed the mountains, it should stay close to the valleys, which have the advantage of water and grass. As Master Wu said, do not stay in heaven's ovens, the mouths of large valleys. In other words, stay close to the valleys, but not in them. Zhang Yu. Stay close to the valleys because of the supply of water and grass, but also because it is safer there. In the later Han, Ma Yuan was sent to exterminate the Qiang tribesmen of Wudu. The Qiang brigands were up in the hills, and Ma occupied a favorable position, not offering battle, but seizing all the supplies of water and grass. The Qiang were eventually forced to surrender out of sheer hunger and exhaustion. They clearly had not grasped the advantage of staying close to the valleys.
Camp high.
Giles, not on high hills, but on knolls or hillocks elevated above the surrounding country.
And face the open.
Cao Cao, the yang, or sunny side.
Fight downhill, not up.
Cao Cao, do not confront the enemy from a lower position.
These are positions in mountain warfare. Cross rivers, then keep a distance from them.
Cao Cao, in order to tempt the enemy to cross after you. Zhang Yu, in order not to be impeded in your movements.
If the enemy crosses a river toward you, do not confront him in midstream. Let half his troops cross before you strike.
Master Wu's Art of War, Chapter 2. When the enemy is crossing a river and only half his force is across, then you can attack. Zhang Yu, wait until he is halfway across the river. Then his ranks will be disorderly, his vanguard out of contact with his rear, and an attack will be sure to bring victory. He Yan Shi. In the spring and autumn period, the Duke of Sung came to the state of Chu to do battle at Heng. Before the Chu army had crossed the river, the Sung troops were already drawn up in battle array. The Sung marshal said, "The enemy are many and we are few. I request permission to attack before they cross." The Duke would not grant him permission. The Chu forces crossed, and before they had time to draw up their ranks, the marshal asked again. Again the Duke refused. The Chu army drew up their battle array, and the Sung army finally attacked and was roundly defeated. The Duke himself was wounded in the thigh, and his vanguard totally destroyed. It was because the Duke of Sung went against this maxim that he was defeated. Translator. As Brigadier General Griffith points out, this story is the source of Chairman Mao's remark, "We are not like the Duke of Sung." Li Chuan. As in the great victory won by Han Xin over Luang Zhu, the Chu general at the Wei River. Translator. Giles bases his description of the famous battle between Han and Lung on the account in the history of the former Han. Quote, "The two armies, Han and Chu, were drawn up on opposite sides of the river. In the night, Han Xin ordered his men to take some 10,000 sacks filled with sand and construct a dam a little higher up. Then, leading half his army over, he attacked Luang Zhu. But after a time, pretending to have failed in his attempt, he hastily withdrew to the other bank. Luang Zhu was much elated by this unlooked-for success, exclaiming, 'I felt sure that Han Xin was a coward.' He pursued him and began crossing the river in his turn. Han Xin now sent a party to cut open the sandbags, thus releasing a great volume of water, which swept down and prevented the greater portion of Luang Zhu's army from getting across. He then turned upon the force which had been cut off and annihilated it, Luang Zhu himself being amongst the slain. The rest of the army, on the further bank, scattered and fled in all directions." End quote.
If you wish to do battle, do not confront the enemy close to the river.
Du mu, or he will have misgivings and not cross. Du yo. If you wait for the enemy too close to the river, he will not cross, and will thereby deny you the opportunity to attack.
Occupy high ground and face the open.
Zhang Yu. Either draw up your troops on the riverbank or anchor your boats in the river itself. In either case, it is essential to be above the enemy and to face open, sunny ground.
Do not advance against the flow.
Du mu. Do not take up position downstream in case the enemy opens the sluice gates and floods you out. Zhang Yu. The state of Wu attacked the state of Chu. Chu ordered its minister to consult the oracle about the outcome of the battle. The response was not favorable. Marshal Sima said, "We are upstream. How can it be unfavorable?" So they attacked Wu and were victorious. Translator. This is the 7th stratagem in the 100 Ingenious Stratagems, a work probably dating from the early Ming dynasty, which takes as its point of departure maxims from Master Sun and several other military treatises. The historical illustration is the same as that given by Zhang Yu.
These are positions in river warfare. Cross salt marshes rapidly. Never linger.
Wang Shi. Salty, low-lying terrain offers no sustenance. Zhang Yu. Such damp, unhealthy terrain with scant vegetation should be passed through quickly.
If you must do battle in a salt marsh, keep water plants close by and trees behind you.
Li Chuan. If you are obliged to linger and do battle, this position will be less dangerous and vulnerable.
These are positions in salt marshes. On level ground, occupy easy terrain.
Cao Cao. Terrain suited to chariots and cavalry. Translator. This is Cao Cao's idea. The use of cavalry became commonplace in the 4th century BC, largely inspired by the nomadic barbarians, the Xiongnu. But in Master Sun's own time, if we place that in the first half of the 5th century BC, there were chariots and mounted archers, but not cavalry proper. Du mu. Easy ground is smooth and firm. Zhang Yu. Level ground free from depressions and hollows, suitable for rapid sudden attacks.
Keep high land to the right and rear.
Du mu. The Grand Duke said, an army should have a stream or marsh on its left and a hill or tumulus on its right. Translator. Note how similar this kind of advice is to the advice given by geomantic experts on the situating of a dwelling place. In both cases, the client is being advised how to derive the most benefit from the dynamic of the situation and its topographical features.
Keep death in front and life to the rear.
Du mu. Death means low, life means high. Zhang Yu. Although Master Sun calls it level ground, there are slight elevations, and these must be to the right and rear if we are to exploit the lie of the land. Low land must be in front and high land behind if we are to launch a swift attack.
These are positions on level ground. Observation of these 4 types of positions.
Zhang Yu. Mountain, river, salt marsh, and level ground.
Enabled the Yellow Emperor to defeat the 4 emperors.
Li Chuan. The Yellow Emperor received his military treatise from his minister Feng Hu. Translator. Strategic military knowledge, like sexual knowledge, medical knowledge, geomantic knowledge, and other branches of occult knowledge, was often said to have been revealed to the great mythical ancestor of Chinese civilization, the Yellow Emperor, in a mysterious fashion, usually by a woman, guardian of the arcana. According to one, probably quite late version of the legend, the Yellow Emperor lay for 3 nights in a mist on the sacred peak of Mount Tai, and was there instructed in the secrets of a military treatise not by his minister, but by the dark girl, a creature half human and half bird. Similarly, Zhang Liang was said to have received his military treatise, the treatise of the Grand Duke, from a strange old gentleman whom he met again 13 years later in the form of a yellow stone. And Sun Bin received his instruction from the mysterious master of Spirit Valley. The excavated bamboo strip text contains a lengthy expansion of this reference to the Yellow Emperor, listing the 4 other emperors that he defeated, the red, green, black, and white.
Armies prize high ground, shun low.
Mei Yao Chen. High ground is not only more agreeable and salubrious, it is strategically superior. Low ground is not only damp and unhealthy, it is also disadvantageous for fighting.
They esteem yang, avoid yin.
Zhang Yu. Yang is east and south. Yin is west and north. Mei Yao Chen. Yang ground is clear and easy. Yin ground is dark and contrary. Translator. For yang and yin in this passage, the French translator Jean Lévy, like Marcel Granet before him, uses the southern dialectal expressions adré and ubach, the sunny and shady side of the mountain, following the traditional interpretation of the Chinese commentators, which seems perfectly natural in this context. But he correctly points out that the Chinese words have a much wider and more abstract range of meanings. In the very first sentences of Chapter 1, Master Sun has already referred to yin and yang as an aspect of heaven, one of the 5 fundamentals in all military planning. This sets the Chinese commentators off on lengthy speculations, but it should never be forgotten that even the earliest commentators date from several centuries after Master Sun, who was himself far less involved in the intricacies of the yin-yang polarity. The treatise of his descendant Sun Bin is far more pervaded by the terms and by the yin-yang way of thinking.
Nurture life. Occupy solid ground. Your troops will thrive. Victory will be sure.
Du Mu. The life force is yang, solid ground is high. Nurture the life force of your troops on high ground, and you will not suffer from dampness and other yin ailments. You will be healthy and victorious.
On mound, hill, bank, or dike, occupy the yang, with high ground to right and rear.
Du Mu, Mei Yao Chen. Occupy the eastern and southern flanks, not necessarily the heights, but a position with an open, clear aspect in front of it, and the high, solid ground to the right and behind you. Zhang Yu. A yang aspect means clarity. High ground behind you means security.
Use the lie of the land to the troops' benefit.
Mei Yao Chen. The strategic dynamic of the land is working for you.
When rains upstream have swollen the river, let the water subside before crossing. If you come to heaven's torrents.
Sun-Tzu, Mei Yao Chen. Great waters in precipitous ravines. Translator. I am following Wang Shi's textual emendation here as proposed by Wu Jiulong.
Heaven's wells.
Sun-Tzu, Mei Yao Chen. Places enclosed on every side by steep slopes, with pools of water at the bottom collecting the water of the torrents.
Heaven's prisons.
Mei Yao Chen. Places surrounded by precipices on 3 sides, easy to get into, but hard to get out of.
Heaven's nets.
Mei Yao Chen. Thickets choked with such dense undergrowth that spears cannot be used.
Heaven's traps.
Mei Yao Chen. Low-lying muddy morasses, impassable for chariots and horsemen.
Heaven's cracks.
Mei Yao Chen. Narrow passages between beetling cliffs. Translator. In a fragment cited from a later source, these heaven's cracks are listed together with grave tumuli and old walls as places to be avoided in war. See Li Ling, 1997, page 181.
Quit such places with all speed. Do not go near them. Keep well away. Let the enemy go near them. Keep them in front. Let him have them at his rear.
Sun Bin's Art of War, Chapter 8. The 5 deadly terrains are heaven's wells, heaven's prisons, heaven's nets, heaven's cracks, and heaven's pits. These 5 tombs are death traps. Do not stay in them.
If you march by ravine, swamp, reedy marshland, mountain forest, thick undergrowth, beware. Explore them diligently. These are places of ambush, lairs for spies.
Zhang Yu. We must also be on our guard against traitors who may lie hidden, spying out our weaknesses and eavesdropping on our commands.
When the enemy is close at hand and makes no move, he is counting on a strong position.
Wang Shi. His position is strong, so he is unafraid. Giles. Here begin Master Sun's remarks on the reading of signs, much of which is so good it could almost be included in a modern manual, like General Baden-Powell's Aids to Scouting.
If he is at a distance and provokes battle, he wants his opponent to advance.
Giles, probably because we are in a strong position from which he wishes to dislodge us. Du Mu. If he were to come close to us and try to force a battle, he would seem to despise us, and we would be less likely to respond to the challenge, so he keeps a distance. Chun Hao. Having once lured us into advancing, he will seize the opportunity to attack.
If he is on easy ground, he is luring us.
Zhang Yu. If the enemy has quit the strong ground and taken up position on exposed terrain, it must be either because there is some hidden advantage or because he wants to lure us into battle.
If trees move, he is coming.
Cao Cao. They are felling trees to clear a passage. Zhang Yu. Every army sends out scouts to climb high places and observe the enemy. If a scout sees that the trees of a forest are moving and shaking, he can deduce that they are being cut down to clear a passage for the enemy's march. Another interpretation takes it to mean that they are cutting wood for weapons.
If there are many screens in the grass, he wants to perplex us.
Du Yo. The presence of screens or sheds in the midst of thick vegetation is a sure sign that the enemy has fled, and fearing pursuit has constructed these hiding places in order to make us suspect an ambush. Giles. It appears that these screens were hastily knotted together out of any long grass which the retreating enemy happened to come across.
Birds rising in flight are a sign of ambush.
Zhang Yu. If birds that are flying along in a straight line suddenly soar upward into the sky, it means that the soldiers are setting an ambush below.
Beasts startled are a sign of surprise attack.
Zhang Yu. Surprise attacks are usually launched from some precipitous height or out of dense undergrowth, and this startles the creatures lying hidden there into sudden movement.
Dust, high and peaking, is a sign of chariots approaching.
Mei Yao Chun. Horses and chariots are heavier than men and raise a higher cloud of dust. Zhang Yu. They also stay in the same track, and so the dust rises higher in columns. Every army on the march sends scouts ahead, who, on sighting dust raised by the enemy, gallop back and report it to the commander-in-chief. Translator. Giles offers us a quotation from Baden-Powell's Aids to Scouting. Quote, "As you move along, say in a hostile country, your eyes should be looking afar for the enemy or any signs of him, figures, dust rising, birds getting up, glitter of arms, etc." End quote.
Dust, low and spreading, is a sign of infantry approaching.
Du Mu. Foot soldiers move more slowly abreast, so the dust stays lower and is more widespread.
Dust in scattered strands is a sign of firewoods being collected.
Zhang Yu. Men are sent off in parties to gather firewood in various places, so the dust rises in scattered strands.
Dust in drifting pockets is a sign of an army encamping.
Zhang Yu. In planning the defenses for a camp, small detachments of light cavalry, will be sent out in all directions to survey the position and determine the weak and strong points, hence the small drifting pockets of dust.
Humble words coupled with increased preparations are a sign of impending attack.
Du mieux. The enemy's envoys come to us with words of appeasement. Meanwhile, they are busy fortifying their position. They appear afraid of us, but their real aim is to make us contemptuous and slack, after which they will attack us. Zhang Yu, Records of the Grand Historian, Giles.
This book is continued on Disc 7.